You know, when you picture the absolute pinnacle of high-end horticulture, your mind probably goes straight to a massive scale.
Right, like sprawling English country estates.
Exactly. Or, imposing oak trees with centuries of history, or giant engineered rose bushes taking over a manicured lawn. We've really been conditioned to think that in the gardening world, size equals prestige.
Yeah, bigger is better.
But today, we're looking at a plant so incredibly microscopic, so unassuming, that if you were walking past it, you'd probably, miss it completely.
You'd step right over it.
You really would. Yet, as I was reading through this incredible stack of sources we've got for today, ranging from century-old Alpine Garden Society archives to some absolutely breathtaking macro photography from European horticulture journals dated June 2026, this tiny, almost invisible little clump of leaves managed to conquer the elite flower shows of Europe.
It completely subverts our expectations of what a prize-winning plant actually looks like. I mean, we are looking at a masterclass in hidden, concentrated beauty here.
We really are. So our mission for this deep dive is to uncover the magic of Rhodohypoxis, or as it's commonly known, the grass star. I want you to imagine a plant so delicate that it spends half its life totally asleep, just buried underground in a dark little lump.
A very unassuming lump.
Right. But when it wakes up, it produces a bloom so impossibly vibrant, it became a total sensation among British high society before crossing the globe to become an absolute obsession for traditional Japanese bonsai masters.
Which is a wild journey for a single plant.
Oh, and keeping it alive requires you to execute one very specific, highly counterintuitive trick.
It is a fascinating subject because you have this biological organism that evolved for one incredibly harsh, specific environment, right? And then it's being adopted by artists who are obsessed with total environmental control.
Exactly. So to our listener, imagine holding an entire brightly colored universe right in the palm of your hand. That is the grass star. But I want to start by figuring out where this thing actually came from, because reading the sources, I saw it was native to South Africa, but we aren't talking about a tropical savanna, are we?
No, not at all. To understand the grass star, you really have to understand the Drakensberg Mountains,
Okay.
which stretch across the eastern part of southern Africa, encompassing areas of Lesotho, Swaziland, and Natal. And this is an environment of absolute extremes.
Like how extreme?
Well, these plants are true alpines. They grow at massive altitudes, anywhere from 1,000 to over 3,000 meters above sea level.
Oh, wow. That is incredibly high up. I'm imagining rocky crevices and really thin air.
Precisely.
Yeah.
They cling to these moist, grassy slopes, the edges of high-altitude bogs and rocky outcrops. But the critical defining feature of this habitat is the seasonal swing.
Right, the weather patterns.
Yeah. The Drakensberg Mountains experience heavy, drenching rainfall during the summer months. It's incredibly wet. But when winter arrives, the temperature plummets well below freezing and the environment becomes bone dry.
Okay, so it's adapted to survive being absolutely flooded in the summer and then frozen totally dry in the winter.
Exactly.
And out in that wild landscape, there are only 6 true wild species, right? Like Rhodohypoxis barea and Rhodohypoxis deflexa. For centuries, they were just these obscure little mountain gems. But then, the timeline in our sources jumps to 1927.
Yes, the big turning point.
How on earth does a wild South African alpine plant end up taking over the British gardening scene?
It all traces back to a very determined woman named Mrs. Susan Garnet Botfield.
Okay.
She recognized the potential in this tough little plant and introduced it to England. But she didn't just plant it in a quiet country garden. She managed to exhibit her seedlings at the Chelsea Flower Show.
Which is the absolute peak of horticultural high society. I mean, if you win at Chelsea, you are basically horticulture royalty.
You really are. And the debut of these vibrant, tiny African plants caused an absolute sensation among the gardening elite.
I love this story. Okay, let's unpack this. Because it's kind of like Mrs. Garnet Botfield was a talent scout for an indie record label, right?
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, she hikes up into the remote mountains, finds this totally unknown underground acoustic band playing in a cave, hauls them back to London, puts them on the main stage at Wembley Stadium, and just turns them into global pop stars overnight.
And she didn't just stop there.
Right.
Yeah.
She and her daughter Ruth didn't just show them once. They spent years breeding them.
They did. And breeding the grass star is no simple task, given its botanical structure,
Yeah.
which we'll get into in a minute. But through meticulous, patient work, they managed to create 15 to 20 distinct varieties.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of specialized breeding.
Yeah. And many of those original cultivars are still prized today. There's a pale pink variety they named Margaret Rose, and a pure white one named Ruth.
But why did the elite go so crazy for it? Was it just because it was like a shiny new toy from a faraway place?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, elite gardening in the 1920s was very much about prestige through difficulty.
Ah, showing off your skills.
Exactly. High society gardeners love a plant that tests their technical abilities. The grass star's adaptation to that extreme Drakensberg climate made it a phenomenal horticultural challenge in the damp, mild English weather.
Because England is basically the opposite of a dry, freezing winter.
Precisely. Plus, you have to consider the aesthetics. You have this tiny, manageable package offering these incredibly striking colors: intense dark reds, pure whites, and vivid pinks. For breeders, it offered massive genetic potential to play with.
Right, it's like saying, look at this impossible jewel I kept alive. It's the ultimate status symbol. But reading through the botanical sketches in these archives, I realized there's something genuinely weird about the anatomy of this plant.
The flower structure.
Yeah. I was looking at the drawings of the flower, and I couldn't figure out where the center was. It looked completely sealed shut. What's going on there?
That is the defining botanical quirk of a true rhodohypoxis.
Yeah.
Unlike most flowers, which open their petals wide to, invite pollinators in, the grass star has a closed flower.
Closed, like permanently.
Yes. If you look straight down at the bloom, you see 6 perfectly geometric star-shaped petals, but they meet flush in the middle. The stamens, the parts that produce pollen, are completely hidden from view.
Okay, wait. If the flower is closed like a locked vault, how on earth does it get pollinated? Doesn't a flower want to advertise its pollen to bees and insects?
You'd think so. But what's fascinating here is how this ties directly back to their native environment. Remember the summer weather in the Drakensberg Mountains?
Heavy, drenching rain.
Exactly. If the grass star had an open cup-shaped flower, those torrential summer downpours would wash all of its pollen away instantly.
Oh.
Yeah. By keeping the center closed, the petals act as a biological umbrella, protecting the reproductive organs from the rain.
That is brilliant. It's an evolutionary umbrella.
And as for pollination, it relies on very specific, strong, local insects that have actually learned to physically pry the petals apart, force their way inside, and collect the pollen.
That is so cool. And it also explains why Mrs. Garnett Botfield's breeding program was so impressive. She would have had to manually pry open those tiny 2-centimeter flowers to cross-pollinate them by hand.
It requires an incredibly delicate touch.
Hmm.
Interestingly, breeders later crossed the true Rhodohypoxis with a closely related genus called Hypoxis,
Right.
specifically the yellow Hypoxis parvula.
Yeah, creating that hybrid group called X. Rhodoxis. The sources highlight one called Hebron farm cerise.
Yes, a very popular hybrid.
And the twist with the hybrid is that it loses the umbrella, right? It actually opens up and shows a bright yellow eye staring back at you, and the plant grows a bit taller.
Exactly. The hybrid traits come through.
But I want to back up a second, because we haven't really talked about what's happening underground. The sources kept using terms like corm and rhizome interchangeably, and it got a little muddy for me.
That is a very common point of confusion, even in professional gardening literature.
Okay, so what's the actual difference?
Well, to be botanically precise, the grass star grows from a corm, while a rhizome is a continuously growing horizontal underground stem, think of ginger. A corm is a swollen vertical base of a stem designed to store food.
Oh, got it.
It looks like a little fleshy egg or a tiny turnip hiding just beneath the soil. And from there, above ground, it pushes up these grassy, lance-shaped leaves that are maybe 2 to 11 centimeters long.
Okay, let's unpack this leaf situation, because this is where I found the most counterintuitive fact in the entire stack of sources.
The frost tolerance.
Yes, the Great Frost Paradox. So some varieties of grass star have perfectly smooth leaves, and others are covered in these tiny, fine hairs. Naturally, my human brain looks at that and thinks, obviously, the hairy, fuzzy leaf is wearing a tiny botanical sweater. It's going to survive the freezing cold better.
Right, it seems like simple logic. Fur equals warmth.
But the sources say it's the exact opposite. The hairy varieties can only survive drops down to -3 degrees Celsius, while the smooth, hairless leaves can survive plunges all the way down to -12 degrees.
Which is a huge difference.
How is the naked leaf tougher than the one wearing a sweater?
It all comes down to the physics of water. Those tiny hairs aren't designed for insulation. They're designed to capture moisture from the morning dew or fog.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they act like microscopic funnels, trapping tiny water droplets and channeling them straight down a leaf into the center of the corm.
Which is great in the dry summer, but a death sentence in the winter.
Precisely. If water is trapped in those hairs when a freeze hits, the ice crystals act like tiny knives, destroying the plant's cell walls.
Ouch.
The smooth leaves, on the other hand, don't trap water. The moisture simply beads up and rolls off. Therefore, they don't freeze as quickly. For the grass star, cold isn't the ultimate enemy. Moisture trapped during the cold is the enemy.
Wow.
If that fleshy little underground corm gets wet and then freezes, it just turns to mush. It basically rots from the inside out.
So if you want this plant to survive outside of South Africa, you have to control its environment with absolute unforgiving precision.
You really do.
Which actually explains exactly why it was adopted by a group of artists who are obsessed with environmental control.
The Japanese bonsai masters.
Here's where it gets really interesting. In our 2026 horticulture journals, there are these breathtaking macro photographs, and they don't show the grass star planted in a sprawling English garden. They show it being used in the art of kusamono and shitakusa.
Yes, which are incredibly refined disciplines.
Oh, wait, I have to push back here. I thought traditional Japanese bonsai was strictly about celebrating native Japanese flora, ancient pines, maples. Doesn't shoving a South African alpine plant into a traditional display completely break the rules of the art form?
That is a great observation. Traditionally, yes, bonsai focus heavily on native species. But as the art form expanded globally, practitioners began seeking out plants that captured the spirit of the display, regardless of origin.
Ah, okay.
Shitakusa translates to companion plantings, which are placed next to the main bonsai tree. And kusamono translates to grass thing, which evolved into an art form where the accent plant becomes the main focus of the display all on its own.
And the grass star is perfect for this because of its scale. The 2026 photos show a variety called Kiwi Joy, which has these lush, half-double pink flowers, and they aren't just shoved in a plastic nursery pot.
No, absolutely not.
They are planted in these tiny, exquisite, custom-made ceramic bowls. There's one in a deep blue stoneware pot, another in this crackled, smoky raku glaze.
The container is just as important as the plant in this art. Raku is a traditional Japanese pottery technique that involves removing the pot from the kiln while it's still glowing hot.
Which sounds dangerous.
It is. But the thermal shock creates these unpredictable, beautiful crackles in the glaze. It highlights the beauty of imperfection.
The whole display, pot and plant, is maybe 10 centimeters high. They plant the corms incredibly tightly, so it creates this dense, vibrant cushion of grassy leaves bursting with little pink stars.
It's stunning.
But explain the philosophy to me. Why pair this tiny, bright flower with a massive bonsai tree?
Well, in a traditional display, every single element is part of a larger narrative about nature and time. The ancient bonsai tree, with its thick, gnarled trunk and weathered bark, represents the enduring, permanent forces of the universe. It represents deep time, age, and stoicism.
The unmoving mountain.
Yes, and beside it, you place the grass star. This delicate, brightly blooming, intensely colorful, herbaceous plant. It represents the fleeting, vibrant beauty of the changing seasons.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It is a visual reminder of the ephemeral nature of life. The ancient pine tree is permanence. The grass star is the fragile, fleeting present moment.
Wow, it's so poetic. It's like putting a ticking clock next to a billion-year-old fossil. It forces you to appreciate both timelines simultaneously.
Exactly.
But to our listener, if you want to create one of these tiny, poetic universes in a crackled raku pot, you're going to have to work for it. Because the bonsai masters succeeded where casual gardeners failed by following strict, unforgiving rules for cultivation.
You absolutely cannot cut corners with rhodohypoxis.
Let's get into the cultivation survival guide because the sources lay out a very specific roadmap to beating the cold and the wet. First up is the soil chemistry. These plants absolutely despise lime.
Yes, lime is fatal to them.
They need acidic soil, ideally sitting at a pH between 5.5 and 6.
And the physical structure of that soil is critical too. Drainage is non-negotiable.
Right. The experts recommend a very specific mix. You need a little bit of peat to hold just enough acidity and moisture, but you mix it heavily with pumice and either sharp granite gravel or akadama.
Akadama is a really fascinating material. It's a naturally occurring, granular, clay-like mineral mined, specifically in Japan, for bonsai.
So it's essentially baked earth.
Basically.
Yeah.
It retains moisture beautifully, but doesn't break down into sludge, which ensures water always drains quickly away from the corm.
Which is vital. And when you do water them, the European guides specifically say to try and use pure rainwater to keep that pH perfectly balanced. Now, summer care seems like a full-time job.
It really is.
From April to August, when they are in their vegetative phase, the sources describe them as incredibly thirsty.
Thirsty is almost an understatement. Because you are growing them in these tiny, shallow ceramic bowls, the summer sun bakes the moisture right out of the akadama.
Mm.
In peak summer, you might find yourself watering them twice a day just to keep them from desiccating.
Twice a day. Plus, you have to constantly pinch off the dead flowers deadheading to force the plant to keep putting out new blooms.
It is very high maintenance.
Yeah.
But the winter routine is an entirely different paradigm.
So what does this all mean? I like to compare caring for the grass star to managing a high-end smartphone.
Okay, let's hear this.
In the summer, it's this incredibly high-performance machine. The screen is on maximum brightness, all the apps are running, and it constantly needs to be plugged into the charger, which is water.
Sure.
But in the winter, the moment autumn hits, the leaves die back and turn brown. At that exact moment, you have to unplug it. If you get it wet while the temperature is near freezing, it is exactly like dropping your smartphone into a frozen puddle. It instantly bricks the system. The corm rots. Game over.
That is the ultimate golden rule. Cold plus wet equals death.
The sources are militant about this. Once those leaves go brown, you give it absolutely zero water, not a drop.
This raises an important question about our modern gardening psychology. Are we over-coddling our plants? Or do we simply fail to respect their native climatic rhythms?
Right, because we want to nurture them.
Exactly. As humans, we equate caring for a living thing with feeding it and giving it water. But for the grass star, true care means enforcing a strict drought. To keep it alive, we must perfectly replicate the harsh, dry winters of its native Drakensberg Mountains.
And how on earth do we replicate a dry African mountain winter in the middle of a soggy, wet European or North American winter? The experts say you actually have to pick up those beautiful ceramic pots and hide them.
You literally lock them away.
You move them into a dark, cold, but frost-free cellar or garage, and you leave them there. You ignore them completely from November until late February or early March.
If you happen to live in a very mild climate, the sources do mention you can leave them outside, but only if you physically build a little glass roof or place a cloche over them to completely intercept the rain.
It requires so much psychological discipline from the gardener. You walk into your garage in January, you stare at this barren little pot of dry akadama clay, and your brain screams, surely it needs just a tiny sip of water.
But if you cave to your own empathy, you kill the star.
It is a profound exercise in restraint. The plant knows exactly what it needs to do. You just have to get out of its way.
It really is.
So let's bring all of this together. We've tracked the incredible journey of a plant that completely defies expectations. It started high up on the extreme, rain-swept and frostbitten altitudes of the South African mountains, evolving a closed umbrella flower just to survive the storms.
And from there, it was plucked from obscurity by Mrs. Garnet Botfield, who recognized its hidden potential, meticulously bred it, and dropped it into the elite, highly competitive spectacle of the 1920s Chelsea Flower Show.
And because of its strict need for environmental mastery, it found its way into the highly disciplined philosophical world of Japanese bonsai masters. It became the ultimate kusamono accent, the fleeting, vibrant, ephemeral counterpart to ancient stoic pine trees.
And finally, it ends up in your hands. Provided, of course, you have a good mix of pumice, a bucket of rainwater, and the restraint to lock it in a dry cellar all winter.
Exactly. I think this deep dive is a great reminder that true horticultural knowledge isn't just about memorizing random Latin names or fertilizer ratios. It's about understanding the why behind the biology. Why does a fuzzy leaf die in the cold while a smooth leaf lives?
Because of the microscopic physics of water.
Right. Why does it need a dry winter? Because the Drakensberg Mountains are dry. Sometimes, the smallest, most delicate things in our world require the most rigorous, inflexible attention. But when you get it right, they offer the most beautiful rewards.
The patience and the discipline are entirely justified the moment those vibrant pink stars open up in the summer.
They really are. But before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one final fascinating survival trait I found buried deep in the botanical notes.
Oh, this is a good one.
We've spent this whole time talking about how delicate this plant is, how it needs perfect soil, perfect watering, perfect winter protection, or it just melts away. But the grass star isn't completely defenseless.
No, it has a rather ingenious, highly localized biological
It
shield.
does. If a rhodohypoxis corm gets physically damaged while it's resting in the ground, say an insect takes a bite out of it, or you accidentally nick it with a trowel while you're repotting it, doesn't just immediately succumb to the dirt and rot. The corm instantly secretes this thick, slimy substance that flows directly over the wound.
Like a biological sealant.
Exactly. It acts exactly like a human scab, sealing the breach, hardening off, and protecting the inner tissue from external fungal infections while it sleeps.
It is a brilliant built-in defense mechanism for a plant that is at its most vulnerable state.
Yeah. So the next time you picture that barren little ceramic pot sitting in a dark, freezing cellar all winter,
Yeah.
remember what's actually happening just beneath the soil. It's not just dead dirt. It's a tiny self-healing star, resting in the dark, repairing its own wounds, and just waiting for the spring.